Good morning, mathematicians. We are looking at this section C checkpoint. We're wrapping up multiplication and division with multi-digit numbers. Now, number 1 says Kansas and South Dakota both have rectangular shapes. Kansas is 660 kilometers long and 343 kilometers wide. South Dakota is 610 kilometers long and 340 kilometers wide. Now we go down to A, right? We have seen kind of a context statement where it says number 1, and number A is going to give us our first task. If, or rather, is the area of Kansas greater than or less than 200,000 square feet or square kilometers? Explain or show your reasoning. Well, let's think about this. Remember that we're thinking about Kansas. And Kansas was here. We had 660 kilometers long and 343 kilometers wide. Well, really what I would multiply together to get to the actual answer are these two numbers. Now, I don't need to do that here because, again, this is asking us just if it is greater than or less than 200,000 square kilometers. Well, what strikes me is, first of all, even if I just took 600 times 300, which, again, that's less than both of our factors. But even if I did that, I know that 6 times 3 is going to give me 18. And then notice there's 4 zeros outside the basic fact. 1, 2, 3, 4. Well, that already has me to 180,000, okay? Then if I think about even just a portion of what is still left to multiply, even if I just took 600 times 40, which again is still less than my actual value, already this is more than what I would have left, which would be just my 20,000 to get to 200,000. So I know that that is already more than 200,000. All right, I'm finishing up that train of thought here because in combination with what we have already written, we know that this boils down to the idea of greater. It is greater than 200,000. And in what I have just written, I have gone ahead and explained how I know it's going to be greater, right? I did not do it by finding an exact answer. I was not asked to do that. Instead, I've just used my knowledge of numbers and multiplying in order to denote or give that knowledge that it is going to be greater than 200,000. Now, let's go ahead and let's think a little bit now about South Dakota. B says to explain why 200,000 square kilometers is a good estimate for the area of South Dakota, right? Well, remember with South Dakota, and I'm going to switch colors just because I want us to see the difference here. South Dakota was 610 kilometers long and 340 kilometers wide, right? So thinking about that, I know that South Dakota, I'm going to go ahead and start writing out this thinking as I'm explaining it. I know that South Dakota is a little bit more than 600 kilometers, km, long, and 300 kilometers wide. Now, notice I haven't taken the exact answers. I've only taken an about number, right? Now, I can say that 3 times 600 is going to be 1,800, right? And then 100 times more, because it wasn't really 3, right? It was really 300. So I'm going to say, and then 100 times more is 180,000. Now, because of that, I know that it's a good estimate. So I'm going to write that statement down here. I'm going to write, so 200,000 is a good estimate. Okay, and I have given a good explanation because I've said that those answers, or those numbers rather, that are just a little bit smaller already get me to 180,000. And so if I use those exact answers, then certainly I'm going to be even closer to 200,000, right? That is a good estimate for South Dakota. All right, now we're going to come down to number 2. And number 2 is certainly asking us a very different situation. Number 2 says the back of a garbage truck is 23 feet long and 8 feet wide and 12 feet tall, right? The back of a garbage truck is 23 feet long, 8 feet wide, and 12 feet tall. Then we're asked how many loads of trash from the garbage truck will it take to fill a 40-foot by 9-foot by 8-foot storage container. So let's first consider. I'm going to kind of sketch this out a little bit or write this out a little bit. The first thing that I'm going to consider are the dimensions of the garbage truck. I'm going to write that down here, that I'm thinking about the garbage truck. Now the dimensions of the garbage truck are 23 by 8 by 12, right? The length, the width, and the height. Now, if I go over here and consider the storage container, I'm just going to write container, but this is a storage container that apparently we're filling with garbage. Not sure why, but that's okay. We're going to think about the dimensions of that, and we know that to be 40 by 9 by 8, right? And both of those are the same unit. Both of those we're measuring in feet. Now, the first thing that really jumps out to me is one of those numbers, one of those factors is the same, is it not? So here I would multiply by 8, and here I would also multiply by 8. So you know what I can do to make this math a little easier for me to calculate? Because each set of side lengths has an 8, I can actually take that out of my equation, because I can simply calculate here my 23 times 12, and over here I can calculate my 40 times 9, and I'm going to go ahead and take for granted that the number that I get is going to be 8 times bigger in actuality, but since it's going to be 8 times bigger for the garbage truck and 8 times bigger for the container, it's okay for me to go ahead and calculate just the two dimensions that are different, because that is where the difference will be. Isn't that a smart way to do this problem? So let's go ahead and let's think about 23 times 12. Well, I'm going to start with multiplying by my 2. 2 times 3 is 6. 2 times 2 is 4. Now I have my 0, and of course 23 times 1 is going to be 23. So I'm going to add this together, and I have 23 times 12 gives me an answer of 276. Now again, that's a number. That is part of those dimensions of the garbage truck, but it helps me to have an easy comparison between the two. Now for this, I can think about 4 times 9, which is going to be 36, and then that extra 0 outside the basic fact. Now here's the thing. Since I know that one load of the garbage truck, 276, is not going to fill the container, 360, I'm actually going to need 2 garbage truck loads to fill the container, right? So now let's go ahead and let's write out what we did in an explanation, because we were asked to explain or show our reasoning, and certainly what I did here helped me to understand my thinking, but it might not be enough for someone else to follow. So I'm going to even give myself a little box to separate it, and I'm going to say that I need 2. I need 2 what? I'm going to need 2 loads from the garbage truck. Okay. So I've given a very basic answer, but I have related it back to the context. That is simply reporting the answer. That's not my explanation. Now I'm going to talk about why I didn't address the 8. So I'm going to say that each set of side lengths has an 8. So I can compare 23 times 12 to 40 times 9. All right. Now I'm going to write what those equal. I know 23 times 12 equal 276, and 40 times 9 equal 360. So one load of trash is not enough but 2 loads are. Oops. Let me erase this. I'm so close to the end. I don't want to lose it now. Here we go. But 2 loads are. All right, boys and girls, man, this section C checkpoint definitely had some deep thinking in it, but we have persevered through that. We have answered both of our problems. We have applied our multiplication and division skills to some real-world mathematical problems that have involved area and volume. And that finishes out this section C checkpoint.